All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off a very special guest episode. And it almost doesn't even feel right to call Roni, who's going to be in this conversation today, a guest, because she's more than a guest. She is a true friend. We've been connected for a number of years now. And for those who are not aware, whenever you can't exactly remember how long you've been connected with somebody, you just say a number of years because it goes back quite a while. So sit back and relax and enjoy this particular conversation. Prior to getting into this convo, though, as always, I want to make sure that I never forget to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. Truly appreciate the fact that you chose to listen in and give us a chance, both myself and Roni, a chance to share our perspectives on what we're going to talk about today. So without further delay, first, Roni, how are you today? How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am in a good space and there's lots of really cool stuff happening in my life right now. So I'm living large.
I like hearing that right off the bat. So instead of starting things off with my perspective of who you are and what you do, I'd like to ask you if you'd be cool with sharing with folks first, who are you and what do you do?
Well, first of all, buckle up because it's kind of a weird way I got here. Currently,
This already tracks really well. Right?
You've known me a while. You know this is going to go some crazy places.
You bet.
Currently, I am working for a YMCA here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I work with adaptive sports, which is basically taking any sport or any activity that's out there, dancing, fitness, wellness, team sports, individual sports, and adapting them and adjusting the way they're done so that anybody can participate. So my work at the YMCA is that I started that job because I am involved in a program called Top Soccer, which is connected to U.S. Youth Soccer for 21 years now.
Really?
I coach, direct, educate in that program. That's an adaptive soccer program. And I also work with Miracle League Baseball and other programs such as that. And then I also have recently started a not-for-profit to kind of support that work and kind of bridge little gaps where funding wasn't possible because we didn't have a place to put money. So it just was sort of kind of helped out supporting all the places that weren't already established through the programs that I was doing and through the YMCA and the soccer clubs and things like that. So I needed a place to put that. And if you knew me back in high school, we were just talking a little bit about people we knew way back when. Mm-hmm. Nobody saw this coming. Even I didn't see this coming. I was a music geek. I was a theater geek. Did all of those things. Sports was not on my radar. And just before my 40th birthday, I, on a double dog dare, took a step out on a soccer field and absolutely fell in love with the sport. So that's now 20 some years ago. And I just fell headlong into it, coaching all the things, directing all the things. And now I'm narrowing it down as I'm getting into my golden years, narrowing it all down and funneling it down to the one piece that really makes my heart sing. And that's working with people with disabilities.
Okay. So there you go. You started off really well with buckle up because I didn't know which direction we were going to go because knowing you the way that as well as I believe that I know you, we could go a lot of different places. And there's a pretty good chance that we're going to anyway, somehow bring in something, some German history, probably some knitting, some different things will pop into play. Here's a question that I have for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's a question that I have for you. When you talk about what I'll paraphrase as where someone would have guessed that you would end up if they knew you back in high school and where you are now and the field that you're in. Talk to me a bit about why you think that would be the case as far as where somebody would say, hey, I'm just making up a scenario, out of 5 different arenas that I would believe that Roni would currently be involved in, this would be number 6 out of those 5, meaning they wouldn't have necessarily had that. Because I think that's something that can be I hear similar versions of that from people pretty often, especially just with the crowd that I usually will talk to. And I'm all about like perspective. And, I share a very similar story where it comes to my passion and my love for all things fitness related. No one would have ever predicted that. And I still sometimes am like, am I for real in this? And I'm in it. Talk to me a bit about where that comes from. Why do you think this would be something that people would be like, nah, no way?
Well, I have to say, when you first told me your story, I went, oh my gosh, that is like parallel to mine.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really funny because I would have, not knowing you back then, I would have been like, you got to be kidding me, right?
Right.
I think part of it for me is I was never one to really stick with anything. And my secret sweet spot is 6 weeks. And,
You bet. Yep.
and I
Yep.
honestly, I'm not one to stick with something and to have something grasp on it was basically a double dog dare that got me out on a field. To have something stick from a double dog dare 20 weeks or 20 years is just, it's beyond anybody who knew me, beyond their comprehension. Teachers, parents, like even my own husband, who soccer wasn't a thing back when I met him. Like I said, nobody saw that coming. And I think the reason why that stuck so hard was, well, community is a big part of it, and being active was a big part of it. I just knew, even though I didn't grow up with the sports and all of the things, we grew up just doing, I'm from, the Gen X where we got left on our own so often, just like go, and it was play till from daylight to dusk. And so I'm kind of just used to being active all the time. So that whole soccer thing played into that. And then when I started playing, the reason why it was such a comfortable entry was it was a women's club that was designed to make it easy and comfortable for women to enter that space. From moms on the sideline that never played before, wanting to play because their kids were playing, it looked like fun. This woman that I know had put this together, and it made it just such a easy transition to go from, this is not something I would do, to this is what my career is going to be. And when I stepped out on the field, I just kind of knew that was going to be something I was going to dig into. And one thing would always just lead to another choice, which would lead to another choice. It started with assisting a guy with little kids coaching on a field, because I swore I'd never coach. I swore I'd never ref. I swore I'd never do a lot of things that I am doing now. And it was just because they presented, I think the right people were in the right places to encourage it. And then I've also got, I swear, a 7-year-old that lives in my head that has no boundaries, that is like, I'm going to try anything. Yeah. So that's why I found myself on a soccer field. When I turned 50, I found myself in an Olympic weightlifting competition because somebody dared me to do that. 60, I'm on roller skates because somebody dared me to do something different, So that 7-year-old comes out and is like, what's next? So I think the woman who started the club, it's kind of interesting. The woman who started the club, when she first met me, and she's still a very good friend of mine now. She's also a good business partner, mentor, all of these things. She said she couldn't believe the transformation from when I first stepped out on the field to where I am now. And I really just attribute that to what sport can do for a person, building confidence and giving them, ways to learn leadership skills and, pivot skills and nimbleness and all of these things. I was not a person who was encouraging my own kids to be in sports. If they wanted to, that was great, or whatever. But there was never any real push towards that. And part of me wishes I would have encouraged that a little bit more. Part of me wishes I would have been in sport a little bit more as a kid, because I see all of the good things that come out of well done sport. And there's so much positive that comes out of it. So I think that probably was a big piece too, where I was able to grow as a person and grow in like every aspect of my life. I can lead it back right to that first step on the soccer field.
Wow, that's really compelling from a couple of aspects. So thank you for sharing some details with that, because one of the things that really just jumps out to me is that someone laid a foundation, or someone opened up your eyes to an opportunity that perhaps I don't want to put words in your mouth. So let's say from my perspective, it just seems like you have this woman who approached you who had something that she put together to try to open up your eyes or open up people's eyes to an opportunity that is for them, that previously you or others may have told themselves that's not necessarily something that's for me or something that I can get involved in. And again, just from my perspective, I see kind of, how my brain like operates. Like I just kind of see some of the layers underneath that. And I immediately become like Bob Ross, where I just start to put the picture together where it all starts to track for me now, where the field that you are in now and the things that you're so passionate about is about accessibility and opening doors for people to get through, where perhaps in other areas they may not have been encouraged or may have told themselves, well, that's something that's not necessarily for me, sort of thing. So that's, again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. It's just me sharing my perspective on how I can already see how those tracks are very, very parallel to each other. I do have a question though. Prior to going into the depth that you've gone to in this field, and we're going to shift gears here and really start to talk about like the foray into specifically adapted sports, what were you primarily involved in, like career-wise and otherwise? Like what was taking up the majority of your time? And let's say in your 30s to early 40s.
Buckle up again. I got a list. I was
Cool.
a barista.
Okay.
I was a barista for many years. I was a orthodontic dental assistant. I worked in a quilt shop. I was a knitting, spinning, weaving teacher, and all of those things layered together, raising 2 kids. I was a stay-at-home mom. So it kind of afforded me the opportunity to do whatever came across my plate. And each of those lasted, in the context of a ratio of time, about 6 weeks. So
oh my gosh.
All the things that I've done, it like lifetime span. Yeah, about 6 weeks each of them. A little bit here, a little bit there. But just all kinds of different. I taught German.
I call it professional dabbling.
Yes, yeah. I could teach it. I also was a German teacher for a while.
Okay.
And wrote a curriculum. That also was one of those things where I was bridging a gap, because there's, the programs where you're all in with German as a child or all in high school, but there was that space where I was a parochial school kid and they didn't have those specialized classes. So kids going into high school didn't have that language experience. And so it helped them with transition into the high school. They called them flex classes or something like that, I guess. And so wrote a curriculum for that and taught that for about 5 years in different schools, and kind of introduced kids to the German language so they were ready for it when they got to high school and they were like, yeah, German's not my thing. Maybe Spanish is a better idea, or maybe language altogether is not a good idea. It kind of depends. But yeah, because back in my day, I was fairly fluent. My dad's from Germany. Didn't learn it as a kid. That was another one of those things. I think I'll learn German this week. And that one stuck for a while too. So I was pretty fluent for a while. Now it's use it or lose it. It's in my head, but I can't speak it as well as I used to.
Okay. See, I foreshadowed this. I knew we were going to somehow talk about speaking German. So, okay. All right. So the natural question that I believe is going to be on everyone's mind is the passion and purpose and focus that you have on adapted athletes. What is the correct term for me to use? Adapted athletes or adaptive athletes?
I think adaptive is a better description because it's always evolving. One day it's one thing, with any particular athlete. And you're kind of just meeting whoever you have out on the field. Some people have gotten to the adapted point where they're like, yep, got this, and this is my thing. But I think adaptive is a nice term because it just evolves with the person who's playing.
Okay.
But
so how did that become the, for lack of a better term, specialization and primary area of focus that you have gotten into from a sport standpoint? How did that come about?
Accidentally, to be honest.
I am shocked to hear this,
Ronnie. shocked, right? I was working in a facility and I had been there, I don't know, about 6-7 years, and my coaching piece was starting to develop. I had helped develop a small club there, and I was directing the club, and I was coaching with another guy, a good friend of mine. He still is, actually, he's in Colorado, very high level elite youth soccer coach.
Okay. And was this a youth
National
club?
Coach of the Year. It wasn't necessarily a club. It was just a space where a lot of clubs would come in. It's more of a facility.
Okay. Gotcha.
At that time, I was not working at any club soccer. So this guy that was coaching with me, I was kind of his assistant. And at that point, I was not going to ever coach soccer. I was going to assist people, but never going to coach it. And by that time, been established in there, people knew who I was, and there was a program running already. This program's been around since 1990s. And actually, one of the very first iterations of the program was initiated right here in Milwaukee. The gentleman who did that in the 90s is still with the program. He coaches another ground level one right next door to me. And saw the program in the building and watched them play, and I thought it was really cool. And the gentleman who was running it at the time said he was kind of looking for his exit strategy. Okay. And was looking for somebody to coach the program. And my colleague, his name was Javi. Javi's like, well, I could do that, but I want you to help me. And I'm like, okay, I'll help you. And so Javi goes out first night, takes the course session, runs it. It's great. We leave. That was really fun. The next week he comes in. I got to leave early. He was coaching other things. He says, you got this. It's just a scrimmage at the end. And so I finished out the session, coach it. Third session comes around. I'm going to be a little bit late and I have to leave early. I'm like, I see where this is going. And so by the fifth session, I'm coaching it. Javi's not in the picture anymore. And the gentleman is like, you got this. The man who was running it, he goes, I'll do the admin. Can you coach? Absolutely. And his son is actually still playing with me. There's no top end age limit for this group. So it doesn't end at 18 or 21. You can play, we say, birth to gray,
And are you referring to top soccer right now?
Yes, top soccer. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
So ended up coaching, and then Bob, the dad, stepped back even more, and now I administrate that program, and that's like I said, very accidentally. And now I have the ground level program, but I'm also the Midwest representative, or I'm the Wisconsin state chair for this program. So I help programs get started in Wisconsin and help the ones that are existing and running. We've got about 12 of them in Wisconsin. And then I sit on the Midwest rep to the national committee now. Mm-hmm. And because the program is across the United States. So I have 12 states that I help assist get programs up and running, keep number counts up, finding out, who wants to start programs, what resources do we need, coaching, education, things like that. And that also was an accidental. I went to a symposium and I just couldn't not ask the questions, because they kept saying, why aren't our numbers going up? Why is this happening? It was woe is me at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I had just started. I'm like, sit on your hands. Don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. It's a 3-day thing. Day 3, I just couldn't do it anymore.
Unload.
Raise my hand.
Yeah.
I'm like, I got questions. Yep. So they're like, well, you're asking some good questions. Maybe you should be a part of this, part of that. So that's kind of how that happened. And
you just volunteered.
I don't regret
yourself,
it.
Basically.
I did. I don't regret a bit of it, though. It's really interesting to see how it works from the bottom to the top.
Okay.
Good stuff.
And for my own curiosity, is there a link between your organization and then Special Olympics too, or like a partnership or any sort of collaboration that crosses paths?
There is in some states. It's not a real tight one.
Okay.
In Special Olympics, there's a sort of a misconception if you're not in the space or if you don't do the research. Special Olympics has a focus on athletes with intellectual disabilities. Okay. So athletes with physical disabilities don't fit in their model. And so they're not all-inclusive program,
Okay.
but they serve a very great purpose. It's a great organization, but
Yeah.
they don't serve everybody. And
Gotcha.
top soccer is a little
Okay.
bit different, where we don't have that. Whatever it is, we have kids with neuro disabilities, we have kids with emotional and learning disabilities, we have kids with physical disabilities, and it just doesn't matter. We find a way for you to get on the field and play the game. It's a group of everybody. We'll call it organized chaos. It's a group of everybody. You could have a wheelchair, a frame, a runner, a sitter, a screamer. You could have it all on the field at once, and you have to figure out how to make that look like soccer. Where when you have these programs like there's a CP soccer, a cerebral palsy soccer program, there's a blind soccer program, a deaf soccer program.
Gotcha.
Those are all well serving to the people who have that diagnosis. So if you don't know about that, maybe TOPS is a good entry level place, and then we can dish you off to the one that serves you the best.
Okay, that makes sense. And thank you for taking the time to explain that to me, as I am representative. I don't represent the people. I am representative of a person who doesn't have a lot of knowledge when it comes to understanding different organizations and what they do and or don't specialize in. My one slight peek into it, working out at and coaching at a gym that does have a SOAR program where they focus on training weightlifters for Special Olympics competition. So that's why it kind of popped into my head. And from my perspective, I didn't take that as you throwing shade on anybody, as the kids say. I looked at it more as being able to clarify, and that makes a ton of sense. Okay, and you actually just already started getting into what my next question was going to be, which you did ask, is when it comes to, which you answered, which was going to be referencing when an athlete comes to you, is there any particular criteria or anything when it comes to who you do serve? And you very eloquently just answered, it's essentially come as you are and we'll figure it out. Is that fair to say?
It is, yeah. And most of the space that I work in is like that, which that just really vibes me big time, because over time I have just learned that there's nothing out there in the world that somebody wants to participate in that they can't participate in. I think there's a lot of spaces where people make the assumption if you have this, that, or whatever going on, that it's going to limit you somehow. And the limitations are there really just, it's environmental limitations. They're not necessarily, they talk about two models of disability. One is a medical model, one is a social model. The medical model is we have to fix the person to fit in the space that exists. So if you're coming into a gym, say, we have to figure out that it's kind of what PT is for. We're going to have to try to fix you to get back to a certain standard before you can participate in this thing with any efficacy, right? Where the social model is, well, how can we adapt the environment, the activity, the thing that's going on to fit the person who's coming in the door? And take it one level further, how can we do that universally so that we're ready for the person that comes in the door? We're not just getting that person in going, oh, we have somebody deaf here now. Who knows sign language that we can communicate with this person? No, maybe we have somebody on the line already going, you have a hearing impairment? I know somebody we need to bring in so that we can make this work for you. So you're thinking ahead versus reacting to the situation.
Wow. So to me, that requires an incredible level of, among many things, patience, confidence, flexibility, and discipline. So patience, because humans are humans, regardless of who they are. Humans are humans, and humans are going to human. Confidence in your ability to be able to roll with literally anything. Flexibility, because even in the scenarios that you just mentioned, you just never know. So being able to adjust and adapt that particular environment to be athlete centric. Like that's very eye-opening to me to consider that the focus is on how do we adjust the environment to be welcoming and empowering for the individual versus how do we work on getting the individual to fit the environment that we've set. It's a very different take on it. And in order to be flexible, my perception is that you also need to have an incredible amount of discipline. And when I say discipline, what I'm talking about is there has to be some sort of a foundation and a structure that is just the very basic of the most basic to be able to know, like, regardless of the way that we're going to have to navigate left or right, we do know that we at least know the vehicle that we're using to drive, like that sort of a thing, which speaks to my
Yeah,
soul with the basic foundational things.
yeah,
And then you adapt and grow from that.
I'm going to throw something else out there that I know will speak to your soul, because this goes way back to the very beginning of when we first met.
Mhm.
It takes an open mindset. It's not that fixed mindset where you're going in. Remember those days?
You're talking to me.
Where you're going in. Yep. When you go in with that, this is how I know I want it to look, and this is how I know it should look. All the shoulds, woulds, and have tos. You have to throw them all out the window. And you have to have that open mindset of, how could this look? What could walk through my door? I need to be ready for that. So how am I going to be ready for that? What knowledge do I need to know? And I will always challenge any coach when they think that they have to have a special particular knowledge to work with this community of people, that I lay it on the table. If you are a good coach, you will already have the skills to work with the person that walks through your door. Because you're not going to treat me as a 60-year-old woman who, kind of flits from one thing to the next. You're not going to treat me with the same kind of programming as you would treat a 30-year-old soccer player who's coming in to do strength and agility to be better at their game. It's like, if you're a good coach, you're individualizing your program for the person who is in front of you, who walked in the door, and you're not meeting them on some level up here thinking, well, this is where they should be. You need to find out where they're at, what their past is, where they want to go, all of those things. You're doing the intake, right? And I think the only thing that you're adding to this is, so you have a person that comes in who's using a wheelchair. Clearly, there's a different mode of mobility there. So what is it that we can do to accommodate the wheelchair? Do we have enough space between our machines? Like, do we have this set up in a way that you can even just access the stuff that you need to access? And then once you can access it, can you get in and out of your chair? Can you, go from floor to chair to maybe you can go to standing. You just have to figure out what that person can do. And then you are tailoring your training or whatever it is you do. In my case, the soccer piece. I have a guy who uses a wheelchair. He's in his 30s now. He's been playing with me for 20 years.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure this out, but we gave him a tennis racket because he has use of one of his arms and a grip. And we give him a tennis racket to dribble with now instead of holding the ball in his lap and throwing it to people. So just figuring out those ways to accommodate. The same thing with power soccer. They put the frames on the chairs and allow you to move the ball with your chair versus your feet or your hands or your arms or whatever. They can participate in a sport that has meaning. It looks like the mainstream sport that you see out on the field. It looks like that as well. It has competition, it has rules, it has referees, all the things that a good sport should have. And it's there for them to play in the capacity that they can play at their best. So I challenge any coach that says, I don't have the skills. You do. If you're a good coach, you do.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I want to address I want to make sure I bring up at least one thing that you had shared with me as we prepared for this conversation, and then a couple of questions here, just as we're kind of bringing the train back into the station here. Something that you had mentioned to me, and it sent me, and I'll read it verbatim, just the way that you had sent it to me as we were just kind of preparing, just kind of sharing some reflections. Something that you mentioned is the voice of the athletes I coach is the most important one. Sometimes it may be through a parent, but their voice and perspective is the one that needs to be heard. Can you talk to me a bit about that? Where that comes from, context, anything like that.
Particularly when you are a person who does not have a disability, it's very, very easy to try to assume what the athlete that's coming to you, or just in general population, when you're sitting in a coffee shop and having coffee with somebody, it's really easy to assume you know what that person needs and try to help and provide and do all the things for that person. And the reality of things is the person who knows what they need is that person. It's not you. It might be a parent, because, it might be an 8-year-old kid or a 12-year-old person who, if they don't have a voice, maybe they're non-speaking. It'd be real easy to assume that you're going to take over those duties for them or speak for them. Another thing that happens often with friends of mine who have disabilities, and they point this out, if they are in a space and they're talking to a coach, and maybe they have an assistant or it's an ASL interpreter, the inclination is to talk to the interpreter or to the parent and not to the athlete themselves directly. Where no matter what the disability is, talk to the athlete first, and then let the interpreter or the translator come in and translate for you. But you're still talking to that athlete. You're in eye contact with that athlete. You're directly in with them, not with this person over here. I see that happen a lot. And like my friends who have disabilities, I work with a lot of people that have become friends over the years. They call me out on my own. It's called ableism bias. They call me out on that own bias because I'm not in that space 24/7 as they are.
Yeah.
I don't always see those things. And I come from my perspective. And sometimes my perspective is I'm helping, or I want to, on the very drastic end of those things, is people out there to save and fix people with disabilities. They don't need saving. They don't need fixing. They may need people to support them to get opportunities opened up for them and things like that, but they don't need us to step in and do for them. But again, like any population, there are, parents who I'm going to speak for my child, even though my child, is 32 and can speak for themselves. Like, you get that everywhere. And so casting the biggest net is, don't make assumptions about anything. You're going to treat that person as if you and I were having a conversation. I'm going to talk to you directly. I'm not going to talk to your wife if she's standing next to you. Can you ask JK if blah, blah, blah? I'm not going to do that, right?
Yeah, I'm going to let you know that's not going to turn out well. Just a heads up.
Oh yeah, no, that wouldn't fly well at all, I'm sure.
Work well.
And so, why would we do that with anybody else? And to the question that was posed on the Facebook post that you put out there, how do we talk to the people? How do we cheer for them? How do we do that? You would cheer at any other basketball game. You would, yep. And the thing is, show up and communicate and have interactions with people with disabilities just as if you would show up for anybody else. It's another human being.
Yeah.
You may figure out there's different ways that you might have to go about doing that, but that's the fun of learning about other humans, though. That's the fun of interacting with other humans, is getting to know, where they are, what they need, what they don't need, becoming friends with them and learning from them. I think that's the coolest part of what I do.
Man, so eye-opening. I'm going to, as we're wrapping up here, I'm going to bring 2 scenarios in that I believe will add some, or bring some context to these questions. And I'm thinking, as I'm trying to kind of formulate how I'm wrapping this. So one other comment / question that was brought up that I believe you've covered, but I'll throw it out there just to make sure that you also would co-sign that you've covered this, was asking or commenting, curious about training curriculums and how they're designed. I think that many people feel disconnected from and uncomfortable with adaptive athletes. A way to bridge that gap is to understand how and why, because the mechanics of something creates comprehension, association, and appreciation. And I believe that you addressed this somewhat with talking about like the importance of the starting with the athlete, like the athlete centric, what I'm going to call the athlete centric model versus the athlete's got to figure out how to fit into our environment versus environment needs to adapt to the athlete. Basically, do you have anything else that you would add to that as far as that the comment there around training curriculums and how they're designed? I don't know.
Yeah, I do. There's some really neat stuff out there now that wasn't out there 5 years ago that helps people. We can go to the training space for a great example. Mm-hmm. CrossFit now has a certification course for adapting CrossFit to like any athlete that comes across into your walks.
Yeah, and very quick, I know that I'm interrupting you, and I'm doing it because I will forget if I don't. Okay. I do want to mention that also is part of the perception, part of what forms my perspective, not perception. My perspective is the box that I'm in has an adaptive athlete class too. So that's what popped in there. And now I apologize for interrupting. I just could not forget talking about that.
No, my world is one of interruptions and I'm usually the one doing it. So it's nice to have the tables turned once in a while. We have a couple of gyms around here, one a little bit north of me, one a little bit south of me. I wish they were a little bit closer, but they do almost now have turned the tables where they're so inclusive that they have almost the same amount of adaptive athletes in their gym as they have mainstream athletes, and they all work out together. It's really quite cool.
Well, they train together.
Yeah, and they do. Yeah, they have some that train together. They have some that are more focused on the athlete. I call that kind of like a segregation model, and that's one thing that's kind of interesting because people always think the words exclusion and segregation are bad ideas. But in this space that sometimes they're not. Like exclusion, there might be a program where you need to be excluded from because you don't have the skill level to either compete in that program or to participate in that program yet because you don't have those skills. And it's important that you don't start there, right? So it's an exclusive, it's a tryout program, or it's a competitive athlete program. A segregated program is maybe like a cerebral palsy, a Down syndrome program, a blind program, a hearing impaired program. You don't want to put a hearing impaired athlete in with a blind athlete necessarily, especially at a competitive level again, because they both have two different skill sets and two different strengths. So, you have a blind athlete that won't be able to compete with maybe a deaf athlete because the deaf athlete can see what's going on. So it's two different games, right? And so that segregation piece is really important so that blind athlete can rise up through and then move on to that exclusionary program, right? And then there's integrated programs that are still focused on that athlete that doesn't, that comes in and has the disability, and the program focuses on that. And then the people without disabilities are supporting that in some way or working with them. And then there's that inclusion piece where I always say it's the box that's there. And my adaptive athlete walks into that box and says, I want to work out here. And they say, come on in, we gotcha. And they're ready for them. So that's the inclusionary piece. So those are all the different levels of it. And I think each one of those levels is really super important. So when you get to that, that piece of how are we ready for them? There's, like I said, CrossFit has training for it. There's another program that is outstanding. Guy in Boston, his name is Brendan Aylward, and he has a training program called AdaptX. I've taken it twice. And if you are a personal trainer and you want to have the most comprehensive set of how to do this, his is so good.
Okay.
If you could take his programming and pair it with what you do in your program, oh my God, it would be amazing. And
duly noted.
Like, you're honestly my favorite trainer. Okay, I'm just gonna say.
Appreciate that.
But the knowledge is out there, and it's just to be had. And some of it's good, some of it's mediocre. It's just like everything else. Like you could go to one personal training certification and go, yeah, it's kind of, halfway done and it's okay. But, and
Yeah.
then there's cream of the crop stuff, and he, like, it's all readily accessible. It's so good. And so if you as a trainer are not confident in that, that's where I would seek out the information. And
Yeah.
like, he's a fantastic, and he's got connections to universities and other trainers, and his network is just flippin' amazing.
Okay. Well,
And if you need something, he's going to get you to that.
I'll have you send me, I'll have you text me a link that we can include in the show notes there for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So to wrap up, one scenario that I want to throw out to you as a way to provide some context. So I'm going to reframe or ask differently the question that one of my friends had posted in the post where I asked for any sort of questions. So the question was, how can we be supportive, what to cheer or not cheer? And I think that you addressed that well. And I'm also going to have you help me understand. Let's say that I am someone who has watched, and this is not, I'll tell you folks, like, this doesn't come from like some made up scenario here. I'm actually weaving together, or knitting. Roni's here, shout out knitting. So knitting together a scenario that has been presented multiple times. So say that I'm somebody who scrolls social media and I see a video, and it's going to go under what we're going to call the Hope Core category. You're familiar with Hope Core? Okay, fantastic. That can be helpful or it can be problematic in itself. So I see a video, and it is a video of, the last 20 seconds of a basketball game. It is an athlete who has been entered into that particular game, and it's the athlete who's been there for 4 years. They were the manager on the basketball team. They've been given an opportunity to suit up for the last game before they graduate from high school. They get the ball and they make a hoop. You've seen some form of this, and I'm assuming. Yep. Yes. And you're nodding your head for those who may not be watching, because this will be on YouTube, but for those who may not be watching, you've seen this. Okay. And then the crowd, there's not really much of a reaction from the crowd, and it's because the crowd has been informed that the athlete does not react well to loud noise and a lot going on in the environment. Okay. So say that someone is asking, how can I be supportive, and what do I cheer? What do I not cheer? How do I react? How do I not react? Because they've consumed content similar to that, where it's put them in a state of, I just don't know, like, what I can or can't do, or should or shouldn't do, because I don't know what is or isn't, for lack of a better word, triggering for a particular individual. What would you say to someone who is providing that sort of context, because they just really don't know, and they're just thinking to themselves, well, the only exposure, quote unquote, that I've had has been these social media Hope Core clips?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. There's a couple of things I'd like. No, that's okay. There's a couple of things that I would approach with that. So first of all, that they took the consideration of the athlete in mind if they have a sensory, like heightened sensory thing going on, where that whole noise thing would trigger them. I mean, good. I'd say good on the people who were putting this all together, that they would consider that at all, and then communicate that to everybody, and that everybody would follow along with that. That's kind of amazing. So in that respect, I see a good thing happening there. I always approach that piece like, you have one athlete who's given this one, they've built up this opportunity for them to do this, and then they've set that athlete up for the success. That's not necessarily bad, but it's also not necessarily good, I think, because, that athlete, it's one athlete, and they've built everything up around that one. And my gut says, good place to start, but let's do better. So you don't have just one athlete with a disability in your school. You clearly, like, if it's any public school, there's classes full of kids, right? So what are you doing to set all those other kids up for successes, for things, whatever it is? Do they want to do sports? Do they want to do this, that, or the next thing? There's Special Olympics has a great program called Unified Schools, and they set up that they're playing basketball games where the rules are you have 3 players with disabilities and 2 players with no disabilities playing on a team, and they play each other. And the game is set up. It's competition. There's wins, there's losses. You don't have to set up this soft space for everybody to land to go, oh, how nice that we did this for the kid with the disability, right? So I always get a little shook when I see those videos, because I'm like, nice, but it's only a starting spot. Then the other piece of that is that athlete voice. A lot of times when I'm talking to my athletes about videos like that, their voice is, why are people cheering for us? Are they cheering for us because, take Paralympic Games, for instance, or any competitive game? People are like, oh, that's so inspirational and it's so amazing. Well, why is it amazing? It is amazing because they spent hours and hours and hours training for this in the gym, because I'm too lazy to get out of my bed in the morning and go to the Y and, lift a dumbbell. So then it's inspiring, right?
Yeah.
But if it's inspiring because you happen to be, with a limb difference and you happen to use crutches or you happen to use a wheelchair, am I inspired because I'm putting myself as a little bit better than you because I don't have that going on in my life? And that's the piece we call it othering, because I might be just that attitude puts me at a level that's better than you because I can do this and you can't do this. And so I'm inspired by the fact that I can run a mile, but you can't run a mile. Maybe you're pushing a mile or whatever. If that's what's inspiring me, then I got it wrong. But if I'm inspired by, I work a lot with wheelchair basketball players, and our wheelchair basketball team for the United States is like absolutely incredible. They win all the time. They're just beasts of athletes. And one of our hotbeds of, we are a hotbed of wheelchair athletes here in Wisconsin at Whitewater University has got an amazing program. But
hey,
colleges
listen
all have
now,
these programs.
Roni.
These guys are training like crazy.
Now, Roni, my daughter goes to University of Alabama, right?
Yes, I do.
And they're not just a football school. Just saying.
No, they are not.
For those in the know, how they get down when it comes to adapted athletics.
Auburn, Auburn has a great, University of Illinois, Central Illinois, amazing program.
We're not going to acknowledge
Clemson,
Auburn, but whatever.
Amazing.
That's fine.
I know. I'm just saying. We're going to level the field here.
Yeah,
everybody can do it.
You're right.
Everybody can get involved, and then you get to pick where you want to go. So, and I find that really amazing, that the hours and the work that these guys put in to be the athletes that they are is what inspires me. It's what motivates me. It's not, hey, the guy in the wheelchair can do it, I should be able to do it too. That's othering. That's a space you don't want to go there. And that's come from the athletes. That goes back to that athlete voice. They're like, we don't want to be, they call it inspiration porn. We don't want to be inspiration porn. We want to be inspiring because we worked hard at something, just like you could work hard at something.
Well, you know what? That is, wow. What a, from my perspective, phenomenal perspective to really wrap things on, with sharing what I believe is going to be an impactful perspective for many listeners of this show. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that. What I don't want to miss before we close out here is leaving space for you to talk about your specific organization, We Are Boundless. So can you share a bit about that, what you do, how people can get involved, and that will take us into the station here.
Sure. So to transition to that, I want everybody to understand that when it comes to sport and comes to all those things, not everybody's going to be real jazzed about, like, I want to get into a gym, or I struggle myself. but it's not everybody's thing, right? But
Yeah.
the opportunity for somebody to be able to do that is just, I want to have all the opportunities out there that can possibly be out there. So that's kind of why We Are Boundless exists. And the simple fact is, out of all the communities that might be considered maybe underserved or sometimes disenfranchised, that sort of thing, the disability community is one that any one person living right now without a disability could be in the blink of an eye a part of. A car accident could put you there. A stroke can put you there. Holy cow, getting older puts you there. I mean, no matter what, like things are gonna go sideways as you get older. You are going to find yourself in a space where you are not as able as you were when you were 20. It's a different ability, right? And so I think We Are Boundless is out there to, first of all, to advocate and be allies with anybody who has a disability and help people understand that we have to start looking at this a little bit more open-mindedly. Like, not to get political or anything, but there's a lot of talk about DEI, and everybody leaves off the A. A lot of people leave off the A of accessibility with the DEI. But the simple thing is, humanity is diverse. Humanity is all over the place. And if we don't look at that way and we just assume everybody else is like us, things are never going to be good for anybody. I, as a person without a disability, am not going to have the opportunities because doors are going to be shut to me. And I know that's a very utopian way to look at that sort of space, but if I'm putting something out there where I can get my athletes out in front of people, give them a chance to talk. One of the things I'd like to do in the future, because it's a new organization, it's only a year and a half old. So one of the things I'd like to do for the future is I'd like to have a platform for my athletes to be able to speak about their lived experience so that people have a little bit more opportunity to hear where they're coming from. Because the biggest thing that made a difference in my life, even though I've been able to do this because I've really wanted to interact with this space, and I've been led there some way. The biggest thing that made the impact for me was becoming friends with my friends who are athletes in the adaptive sport world, learning about how they got there, why they got. Some of them are there because they have disabilities from birth. Some of them are there because they, one of my best stories is a stupid accident when you're 19 and you do something really, really dumb that somebody told you never to do. You do it and you find yourself in a wheelchair now because you don't have use of your legs. Friends of mine, it's just, they were the ones that made the most impact of why we need to be talking about this and why that voice needs to be out in front. Because when you do get to be friends with them, and as our friendships have grown, I have learned more just in these conversations of back and forth than I will ever learn from any program that they put out there, any workshop I'm going to sit in, any of those things. So that human connection is just so important. So We Are Boundless is out there to put that more of that human connection there, whether it's as a sport team, like with my top soccer and my Miracle League baseball that I'm involved in, whether it is a platform like that, whether it's networking with people who are in that space, connecting dots. That's my favorite piece. Like, I see somebody over here that's doing this, that could talk to this person over here and do this, that could bridge a gap. I'm connecting those people. So that's kind of what it's out there for. And it's evolving. Like I said, because it's new, it's evolving. So I don't want to get stuck in that it's only a top soccer thing, or it's only a partnership with Special Olympics thing, or it's only an adaptive sport thing. It's a lot of layers. The website says a lot. The website says a lot.
Okay. Well, I will 100% link that, and then also just have you send me the individual that you were talking about, where if there are other, I believe I got a couple of coaches at least that listen to this podcast, and hopefully others will feel like this is something that they want to forward to friends, family, colleagues, like anybody that they know who they could benefit from this conversation, but especially other trainers and coaches in the space who perhaps are interested in learning more about what resources are out there to help us sharpen our skill set. And
Sure.
I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. Sometimes you'll hear, or pretty often in the podcasting space, you hear people talk about, well, this is a long overdue conversation. We have like receipts of this being a long overdue conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I appreciate you taking the time to connect and really engage and help me, truly me, understand more about what you're involved in. Because this was, as much as I've known, this actually was even more eye-opening than I expected it to be. Like I had pretty high expectations, and then you kind of went above and beyond. So congratulations. So with that, again, I'll put links in the show notes for anyone who would, be interested. I do want to strongly recommend that folks get onto the weareboundless.org website and be able to take a look at some of the things that Roni and her team are involved in. From my perspective, closing out here, understand ways that you, the listener, can get involved to help bridge the gap. And I think that that's a really great phrase to put around it, like help bridge the gap. And even in, again, this hour conversation, there are just so many different things that Roni has really explained and explored with us. So I think it's something that I definitely don't want folks to take for granted. So hopefully after listening to this episode, people will feel encouraged to continue to cheer on athletes just as you would cheer on any person. Like, an athlete is an athlete. So just encourage and engage, and really just continue to do what we can to bridge the gap there. So Roni, thank you again. I truly appreciate you being here today.
I was so excited about the opportunity simply because, again, I always feel uncomfortable about being the one that gets on and does this, but I want to amplify that voice of my friends and all the players that I get to interact with. It's so important to me that, again, that everybody knows that this isn't my voice. This is my amplification of that voice of those folks that are out there doing all the work.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right. So with that, folks, thank you for choosing to listen to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.